Welcome back, everybody. I'm Brian Ricks.
And I'm Aaron Steele.
And we are going to do everything we can to get this demo finished. We have a couple more minutes to finish on our last one. Technical difficulties, they are what they are. Demo world. So let's go ahead and switch back over to the monitor and we will look. We were at the point where we created a user in Active Directory. We associated a custom role called CS On-Prem Admin, which had the voice administrator rights. It was locked down to an OU. We validated that the user could not manage somebody outside the OU, and they could only do voice to the users inside the OU. So that's where we're at. Then we said we wanted to be able to enable a user, and incorrectly we're going to type this command to show what would happen. So here I have setting the CS admin role, on-prem admin. I'm adding a commandlet, or it appears that I'm adding a commandlet, enable CS user. As soon as I hit enter on that, we will notice when I go to get, actually let's do a get this way. Whoops. Whoops. That the commandlet changed. In fact, if we look up above, we see there's get CS admin contact, admin user, ... More than 4. We could have done a dash star and got them all, but more than 4. And now we've actually replaced that multi-value field with just enable CS user. So this user within this parameter would have to be able to run enable CS user. They wouldn't have get, they wouldn't have set, but they would have the ability to do enable. However, because there's really nothing you can do to get or set a user without having some values of some commands, unless you're in PowerShell, this is basically locked down to almost nothing. So let's see if we can get this to pop up. And maybe not. There's my start menu. And we want to go back to our control panel. And I've noticed, and I closed it out because I've noticed that sometimes when let me tag this in here. When I don't and I just log out and log in, it doesn't always give me the exact results that I'm expecting. It doesn't actually refresh things correctly. So here's back as Amy. Pass that word 1 for our super secret password. And as we load it, there's nothing I can do. My role hasn't changed. I'm still a CS on-prem admin, but because I don't have any roles to be able to actually view anything, I can't get anything, therefore nothing's returned from a results perspective. Okay, so that just shows what happens when we do things wrong. Okay. Now, let's come back here and let's go ahead and just remove this, clean it up. When we do so, now you also notice that sometimes I can do a dash identity, sometimes I don't. The way the PowerShell works, the very first attribute that's applied is assumed to be, if no parameters given, to be your identity. So you can save yourself the dash identity if you don't want to. CS on-prem admin. Let's just kill that guy, and voila. I've now removed the new custom group. Again, that's just the custom group attributes. If I go back to Active Directory, the group still remains. And not only does the group remain, but so does the user membership within the domain. So to make sure that it doesn't freak out, we'll just stay on where we're at. Now let's go ahead and do a new CS admin role. And this time, we will call it CS on-prem again. But we're going to use a different template this time. This time for a template, let's go ahead and use the CS user administrator. Okay, and then we're going to do our same user scope, and we're going to lock it down to an OU. OU will equal accounts. So now rather than being Amy's, we're going to be over in the accounts section. And that is a DC equals on-prem, DC equals local, and I typed something wrong. OU equals accounts off-prem versus on-prem. Again, if you don't type things correctly, things don't work. All right, so we'll see here the commandlets again, and maybe let's go ahead and get a CS admin role, and let's go ahead and get the CS on-prem. And let's look at everything. Now, again, here is a PowerShell tidbit. If I do a formatted list, I get back exactly what I just got. If I go ahead and add my asterisk, this will give me everything back unformatted and in all of the element space. So now I can see all of the commandlets that are part of this physical user, and there's quite a few, and the rights that he has. But the one I don't have is call park, and we'll see that now when we go back to Amy. So let's go back in. And we will launch again. Again, she has rights now, still as CS on-prem admin. More stuff pulls up because she is a user administrator, but that doesn't give her rights to the call park world. So let's go into, oh wait, there is no voice features. It doesn't even exist. Oh no. So we want to be able to set and get call parks, as it were. So let's go ahead and do another command. Now this will be the correct way to modify an existing an admin group that's a multi-value. Now again, remember, it's an array of different values that are within this group, and so we're going to use the at and add values. You could also do the remove value to pull people out.
So we're dealing with multi-valued attributes here, so we've got to interact with and do it correctly because of that.
Right. Also, it's not case sensitive, so you know. That's just my ADD that I want it to be right. But it's not case sensitive within here. So now we're going to do commandlets, and we're going to do an add equals, and let's go ahead and do the set. Now one nice thing is I can tab these things out. So if I do CS call, I can do my call park orbit, and then I can also do a get. If I don't do a get, I can't view what's already there. I can only set. So a lot of the times you're going to want to always do at least a get if you're going to do a set or a new or something of that nature. Otherwise, you can't view anything.
Oh no, yeah. Completely agreed. The other thing is a lot of these commandlets that you're using take pipe input. So if you're trying to make the same change to a lot of users, you can get the results you need and pipe that into the set command rather than writing a bunch of different unique set commands.
That's correct. Yeah, and I'll say there's a lot of times we'll be doing these various shell commands, and if you're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over or repetitiously, save yourself the effort and write them down somewhere and copy and paste. It'll save you a lot of time, especially if you're implementing changes for multiple people. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and add those two roles, so those two commandlets. Now when I go back in, because I have given myself the get and the set as Amy, we're going to see that voice feature shows up now, but you'll notice only call park shows up because we can only get call park in the voice feature. We don't have access to the vacant numbers. So again, where we're getting a lot of functionality,
granularity.
It's right down to they just disappear. It doesn't look like it's something that I can go to and not get and get an error. It just doesn't even show up.
Yeah.
So in here, you'll notice new is grayed out. I only gave myself new and set. But I do have this orbit that I can go ahead and get, and if I wanted to change my range to 1,000 to 1999, I have the set ability to do so. So then lastly, we'll say Amy complains, and as our final example, she wants to do new call parks.
She doesn't think she can do enough?
No, she wants to be able to do new. So we'll go ahead and add new. And just by adding it, again, with the add command, again, we can do remove, we can do adds. She now has the ability to do a new call park as well. So the granularity is all based off of what we as an administrator have dictated and delegated down to the users. So we'll bring this last one up, go back into our features, and we'll notice new is now an option. So we have the ability now. So with that, were there any questions or anything that we need to address? If not, we're going to move right on to the next section.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Thanks to our helpful SMEs in the chat room answering the questions.
Okay. So as this comes up, our next section, because of timing and our unfortunates of last time, we're just going to move right in without a break. And this will be on client and device deployment and management.
Okay.
Now devices, clients, that's going to be the clients we've talked about. Devices are typically talking about phone type devices.
Sure. Are we talking about both the Microsoft developed product suite Lync Phone Edition as well as the third-party interop products?
Actually, we are. We're talking about both, right? And we get into the forms, the functions, the features, and where things are going there. So if we look at this, the Lync product itself is not a deployment process per se, right? We have the update service. We have ways to manage some of the devices that we have, but it's not something where we're going to go out to end users' desktops, deploy software, push applications out, give people software that they're using. Instead, we're expecting there to be some sort of either third-party software deployment tool, such as System Center or Configuration Manager, or even going down to Active Directory, which we know you have because you have Lync, so you have to have 8.8, right?
And when we're talking about physical things, right, we're also concerned with getting that physical device out to that desktop and out to that user.
And that we'll talk about with preparing for deployments and deploying the phones, because DHCP plays a large role in phone provisioning and functionality to make things work the way we want them to work.
Most definitely.
Okay, so first let's talk about preparing client deployment. That's configuring client policies and settings and creating and assigning policies. Now, a lot of this, again, follows right along where we were at in 2010. In-band provisioning exists. There's a few group policy type settings that you may want to push down still. But 99% of what we're going to do is all group policy based, or is all policy based within Lync itself. So again, in-band provisioning. In-band provisioning is the idea when we configure a value within Lync itself, whether it be at the global site or user level, of a setting of some sort. So bandwidth levels, how many, or can they participate in a multi-user conference? Can they start a multi-video conference? Can they have X amount of users within their buddy list? All of those type of things are all configurable, and they're all done via policies within Lync, whether they be at the global site or user level.
And are those the same type of policies and settings we push down with group policy?
That is. And in fact, these are the rights and the settings that we push in over and override anything that was pushed through group policy. This is a server-based setting, and it is in-band. So the majority of these settings, although depending on what type of setting it is, a security setting is rediscovered, all done through the SIP process more frequently, but majority of the settings will happen while you're logged into Lync, or not even realizing that it's going to happen. It just happens. One of the neatest, coolest, bestest examples that we have of this type feature is we'll enable somebody for enterprise voice, and you'll be watching the Lync client, and within seconds to minutes, all of a sudden the phone appears because now they're EV enabled. Same thing, we'll then go provision them for unified messaging, and you'll be staring at the EV portion, and all of a sudden the little
wheel shows up,
and you're like, that is so awesome. It just immediately just becomes available, and that's the way that we're doing presence notifications and getting our XML data and getting everything back and all of our rights.
Right,
and blah, blah,
it
blah.
happens through that same SIP protocol. It's just new things that are discovered and sent down to that client.
And they light right up. And much like the way we saw in the control panel, where things just disappear when you don't have the rights to get to them, the same process happens on the Lync client itself, that they just disappear. You just don't have the buttons. They don't exist. It's a very clean way to remove features.
Most definitely.
Without having broken features inside the application.
Right, rather than hiding something from an end user just by graying it out, it's really nice to actually hide something from a user that they can't interact with or forbidden from interacting with via policy.
And one of the big pushes from an administrative perspective of why we wanted in-band policies, not only is it nice, convenient, but it allowed us to take machines that were not member of our domains. So this could be your personal at-home computers. This could be anything from vendors or clients that are on your network utilizing your services while they are on site at your location, for you to be able to control them. Because again, group policy applies to members of the domain. If the computer is not a member of the domain, you're not going to have a group policy pushed down to you. In-band provisioning, as soon as you log into Lync, you get those policies applied based off of what the administrator has provisioned. However, again, group policies still exist, and there are times that group policies are necessary. Really, the only one that I ever really implement often is when we want to force either the inability to change yourself to automatic mode versus manual mode for provisioning your SIP provider, or forcing down the initial SIP provider because they're not using DNS auto discovery for whatever reason.
It really, most of the settings and policies that get pushed down to the client have decided to be, or the Lync product is pushed into in-band provisioning, and it's really exclusively those bootstrap, those pre-settings that are necessary to get the client signed in that we still push via GPO.
We can't tell the Lync client things about Lync until Lync is signed in to Lync. So if we need something to be set prior to the Lync login in process, that's where group policy comes into play. But again, you have to be a member of the domain for those to apply. Otherwise, it's manually configurations and settings. There also are one-off type parameters that aren't controllable via Lync policies. One used to be your default setting for your voice. And I haven't checked this in recent months, so this could have changed. But if you wanted it so that when you joined, click the link, join a conference, do I prompt for my voice? Do I want it to call me? Do I want to join via Lync itself voice or no audio at all? Or do I want my default? That setting is not configurable through policies, but you could, through group policy, create a custom group policy and push that setting down. So again, there are weird one-off type things where you may need group policies, but just keep in mind, if you have group policies, we generally want them cleaned up and removed, and let in-band provisioning do all of the pushing. It'll make troubleshooting much easier and more logical to what's going on. So configuring in-band policies is nothing special. We go to the management shell, or if it's something that's in the control panel that we can control from an application perspective, that's what we do from the control panel. When you're talking about managing the policies, some conferencing policies exist within the control panel. Interesting, the user policies are all management shell only. In fact, the viewing of them doesn't even apply within the management shell. It's the one weird oddity one. Instead of having a view button, there's just nothing there. But majority of things can either be set or configured within the control panel. Those that aren't, we go back to the management shell where everything can be done. So from a group policy, that's your bootstrapping. That's going to GPOs and Active Directory.
It's very parallel to what goes on in Exchange, right? The Exchange product has done for a long time. It is done first and primarily in the PowerShell, and then the management interface, or the graphical interface, is sort of the second child to get all of those settings.
Well, and it's interesting to point out that the graphical interface, in this case our Silverlight app, the control panel, it's only invoking the PowerShell commands under the covers anyway. So anything that is doing within anything that's done in the the control panel, it can be done through management shell, because that's all it's doing is management shell commands. Okay, so nothing super exciting about creating and configuring policies. It's how we've done it in the past. 2010, no change. Bootstrapping issues for clients is still done by group policy, Active Directory. If you're not the AD administrator and the group policy admin, talk to your admin about moving the policies you require. Again, more than likely you're not going to need to go into Active Directory and GPOs.
Right. If you have to use GPO to get the stuff done that should be done via DNS, push for the DNS. Don't rely on GPO, because once you've made that decision to let GPO handle those bootstrapping for sign-in things, now you've made it so that things like your mobility scenarios and some of your other scenarios don't work because you haven't done the work to get the DNS stuff set up correctly.
That's right. Okay. So enough about the basics of group policy and Lync policies. Let's go ahead and talk about deploying and managing Lync clients. Now, again, Lync in and of itself is not a deployment engine. However, there are some things that are provided by Lync, like the web app, that you get from Lync. Some of the other items, not so much, but let's go ahead and talk about what those are. So from a testing exam perspective, there's a lot more that could be done here, and we give a couple of examples, but there's two options for deploying Lync is what we provide. Users managed, in other words, you give them the binaries, set up or MSI, they run it, they install it, they're done. That works.
They run the Office install
right,
pretty
the
much.
Office install. You can get a volume license copy if you have a VLK just of the Lync client itself. That's the only way to get it. And yeah, anyway, typically you're expecting it to be delivered with Office 2013. And the better user experience is with the entire 2013 suite. So there is a push for expectations that everything is completely within there. Then there's a managed deployment. Managed deployments are where the administrator goes through the effort to decide who and which machines get the application. Managed deployments are, in a large scale, are a necessity, a requirement. There's got to be some way to know who's getting what. Plus, you typically want to control from a pilot perspective who are getting what. I will say I had a significantly large client that the effort to make and it was System Center, the configuration manager, and the team that managed SCCM to make us our package was taking too long and was holding up the project. We created a share, threw the executable out on the share, gave instructions to the pilot users to how to go install it and be done with it. We just didn't have the time to wait. That's wonderful and great if you have a small group that you can control 20 people, access rights to the share.
And they have local admin?
Yeah, and they have local admin rights. There was all kinds of specificities for this particular group, and local desktop had to go over and take grant rights to some, had to install it for others. It's a huge mess. Managed deployments give by all of those problems, especially the local admin rights issue.
Yeah.
And nothing does it better than System Center, in my opinion. It works awesome from deploying mass products, especially when you're dealing with a Microsoft product that I can just read the MSI in, and it gets all its values for install, uninstall, create a package, select my group, and voila, off it goes. Super simple, and it's going to report to me what's been done and what hasn't been done. Active Directory, using a group policy to do so in deployment services, that's an option.
You don't get nearly the granularity of the reporting. You don't get all the monitoring of it.
Yes.
You're just kind of flying dark.
You're just saying, go ahead and push it out and hope all gets done. And in the end,
Let's hope we don't override your network.
Yeah, that can be a bad thing. Yeah, and we have no control of a managed push perspective when we're using AD. It's when people log in, they're going to get their policies, and off it goes. So, as Aaron mentioned, the control is much more limited, but the ability to push out to everybody and at elevated rights, Active Directory takes care of that for us. We can install with administrative rights without the users having it. AD can perform those functions, but think of this as a small shop deployment solution, not something that you'd want ever to do in a large deployment.
Yep.
But it is an option. And then, of course, there's all kinds of other parties, third-party tools and applications and deployment methods that exist. And if that's what you use today, great. Test it, and then deploy as appropriate. So for configuring Lync, Lync is one of those products, much like Outlook is anymore. It's gotten to the point where it just auto sets it up, and based off your environment and who you are, gives you rights to what you're going to. So assuming we haven't used group policy and Bootstrapper to go ahead and push down the settings of where we're going, Lync is going to try to do an auto discovery. He does that based off DNS settings. He's going to discover what servers or pool he's going to at least initially talk to, and then potentially be redirected to his pool of where he really is. But that all happens all automatically. There's also the client versioning policy that's part of Lync that can prevent older or even newer versions of Lync logging in, or our communicator for that matter, into your environment, or allowing them. If you wanted to modify the defaults and say, you know what, I want OCS 2007 R2 in, let her in, and an unpatched version that will be unstable. Okay, but you could, and that's all done via the client policy setting.
Yeah, this is something that you use when you're rolling out new versions of the clients. It's something that you can use to help control and manage that user expectation.
I've also seen a situation where there was a particular version, a roll-up that was causing problems in a user's environment. Wasn't a problem that was particularly documented out on the internet as being an actual issue, but for this client it was. So, and it was a newer patched version. So in order to correct the solution, they just prevented that particular version from logging in. And they knew exactly who had manually applied this patch to their box, because all of a sudden these help desk calls came in that they couldn't log into Lync, and it was because they had the newer version of Lync. So you have some granularity and control over who and what can log into your environment, all based off of the version of the client that's logging in. The meeting join page, there has been and online meeting add-ins and privacy modes. These are things that you may or may not want to look at. Do we want to use? Do we not want to use? The meeting page itself, you have the option to say, join the meeting or join the meeting with a previous version of Lync, or as the case may be, OCS, things of previous client versions. Those are configuration options that you may or may not want to be there, but that's controlled from the server side. And then the enhanced privacy mode, again, nothing new. This is a 2010 feature where if you weren't part of my buddy list, you didn't know if I was online or not, and I decided if you were on my buddy list, so therefore I decide who sees my presence.
Yep, searching for you. You can still be IM'd even if somebody doesn't know you're online. It's a little tricky, right? Somebody searches for you, they find you in the address book, they send you an IM, you reply, guess you are online.
All right, and it becomes an interesting thing because presence is only as valid as presence is valid. So we don't get into this in this discussion here. In fact, in 2010 we did, and we talked a lot about the value of presence. So
you can go find that session if you really want.
Do not manually set your presence as something that you're not. So if you're at your desk, don't set yourself to away. If you really are busy, add a calendar item. It'll take a little to reflect, but add a calendar item to book yourself out. You'll show as being busy. That's great. But once you start pretending to be away or pretending to be offline, then the disadvantage is nobody trusts your present state anymore. And that's unfortunately, enhanced presence kind of inherits that even if you're offline, I may still try you. If it goes through, it goes through, and I know you're online. If it doesn't go through, then...
But then you have to look at why the Lync product implemented enhanced presence, and it really came down to a really a regulatory requirement in the EU and Germany specifically that has this this idea that employees need to be able to control whether their boss knows they're working or not.
Right. And since we're on it, FYI, that's also why you have the ability to always turn off your picture. That was the same EU requirement that I should be able to opt in or out of having my picture shown. So anyway, that's just a little side note. All right, so deploying the Attendant. The Attendant is the receptionist application. Good news is the Attendant has not been updated. So if you've used it in 2010, it's still the same application. The bad news is Attendant has been updated. So if you didn't like what was there before, nothing has changed. It's the exact same application. It's a 2010 client that works against 2013.
And it's the Lync Attendant client is a very purpose-built client. It is for high volume, high interaction call center scenarios. It lets attendants really deal with their calls and deal with a large number of calls coming in, a large number of calls that they have to process, cold transfers, warm transfers, some of those voice scenarios that most users don't encounter.
That's right. If you imagine I think of if it's a cartoon or if it's, I don't know, but thanks for calling blah blah, please hold. Thanks for calling blah blah, please hold. Thanks for that concept of 15 calls hitting you all at once, and you've got to queue them all and then get them to the appropriate location quickly. That's the Attendant. Yep. I think two large clients have ever used it 100% and left it that way. It's also by design, by default. If you cold transfer the call away, it will come back if it's not answered by default. Because again, the concept is you're an attendant, you're managing calls, and you're supposed to be getting them to where they're supposed to be going. So anyway, the point being, the Attendant client is the 2010 client. It has not been updated. It is what it is today, and that's the client. So if that works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, then it's not going to work for you because it is exactly what it's meant to do and only that. So moving along. The web app. The web app is designed to be the replacement for the attendee, again, not the attendant. It helps that the attendee is gone just because the attendant and attendee was so confusing. They were so close together by name. But it is the attendee replacement. It is an IIS app. It's a web page. It does not require admin rights to run. There is an ActiveX plugin to install, and it works on Windows and Mac as long as you have the right browser versions. If you have an older browser, it's not going to work. And we don't have any way to get you in if you're an XP box with an old browser version. You're just not going to do it. You can use the 2010 client, but you're not going to get into all the functionality and features that exist in the 2013 world. But the exciting part about the web app in 2013 is that it did replace the FAT client and give you all the functionality that the FAT client had. So there's not a light version now and a full version. It's one client, all web-based, very fast, and able to just run, get up, and join the meeting. You can join authenticated. You can also join as anonymous, assuming that anonymous is enabled in your environment. In addition to the web client, we have the new mobile clients. Now, the mobile clients are the cool new kids on the block. They are the fun applications that turn your everyday smartphone that is awesome for email. It's a great Outlook ActiveSync client. There's a couple of games, they get bored. You have to admit, eventually the phone's just your email client at the end, and sometimes you take calls on it and text on it. Well, now it's also an amazing video phone, but not only a video conferencing phone, but one that works with the enterprise voice calling rights and rules. What this means to you is that you can use, assuming you have either a LAN connection or a wireless LAN connection, or you have a big old data plan.
The data plan needs are, it is something to definitely keep in mind, right? If you're, the client, though, has settings to control that. So the client can force itself to only be able to take and place those calls over VoIP when it has a Wi-Fi connection.
Right, and the same thing happens for video. So we have voice and video controls, again, all through in-band policies. And like the Lync client on the desktop, the mobile client does not have to log out to get this new in-band provisioning. I was pleased to see that just the other day because I tested some stuff. But you do have the ability, and it is different based off the mobile client you're working from, but to take your phone, assuming it has a front-facing camera and a rear-facing camera, start a video chat. And you'll be a participant in the video call. You'll see only an active speaker. Obviously, we're not going to show 5. There's not room on the smartphone to show 5. You're also not going to get PowerPoint content because, again, it's not going to work so well on this little 4.5-inch screen.
Do you get to consume PowerPoint content on any of the iPad? On
the iPad device itself, we do. And, of course, the Windows 8 client, which is not really a mobile client. But if you think of a Surface, it is a mobile client, but not really. But, yeah, anyway. So we have that functionality that exists on the phones. The phones are designed and given purpose based off of their abilities, which is really an important aspect and feature change moving in 2013, where we, as Microsoft, were doing everything we could to take the best, most rich features of the platform and then develop and enhance and expose those features. So again, you look at an iPad, it has the ability in real estate to have and consumer PowerPoint. Now, can it share its desktop and share it? No. It's a consumption device, as expected. In fact, the Windows 8, I want to say Metro, but
the
store app version has similar limitations. But it's what it's designed to do, and it does what it can do very well. It's also, from a feature parity perspective, while things look the same feature-wise, they're implemented, again, based off how the application supports things. So there can be stuff like how fast notification toast and pops come up, because some are push, some are listening live. They're different, but the same end result is what you get. So if you have an Android device, you have an iPhone, or you have a Windows phone, my personal favorite, everything works for the most part as the same. So think of it this way. People can say, I've got an iPhone, I can do FaceTime, and I can do it to my other iPhone users and iPad users. This is true. But can you do it to your Windows Phone friends? And can you do it to your Android friends? And can you do it to a desktop?
To your business?
And the answers are no. If I can take this completely mixed bag of operating systems and potentially clients, let's think a Macintosh desktop user with a Windows 8 user sitting with a Windows Phone, an iPhone, an Android, an iPad, a Surface, all in the same video conference call, all consuming the same data, and all because it's all tied in through Lync. So from the video sharing perspective, it's amazing. From the application sharing, assuming you can consume, it's amazing. And from the phone calls, all of them can do call on my behalf and also ring. So now you have voice over IP, true voice over IP, on a LAN perspective, on a wireless LAN, on these mobile devices, and the phone pops up. On a Windows phone, you get the nice pop-up screen that shows it's a Lync incoming call, and you can answer the call or not answer the call, as the case may be. But you get the inbound notification without having simultaneously ring on, because it's a client. It's just like any other client receiving a call notification pop-up. It works extremely well. And again, it's all configurable through inbound policies of what can and can't be done. Interestingly, only a few of the configuration components exist in the control panel today. with the cumulative update for February 2013, Lync server 2013. With that update, we added the mobility policies, additional ones, but they're all from the management shell only. So stuff like voice over IP is on a wireless LAN only, or video on wireless LAN only. Those are configured through PowerShell.
They can be configured through PowerShell to apply policies down to those devices, or the end users. If the administrator doesn't configure it, the end users can make those decisions for themselves.
Yeah, which end users making decisions for themselves is typically not a good thing in my opinion. So we try to control it. If nothing else, I would say in general, unless you have unlimited data plans, limit the video to on network only.
And even if you've got an unlimited data plan, video on non-Wi-Fi networks is going to be a challenge.
Especially because most unlimited are still 3G, so you're limited. Do yourself a favor and lock down the policies, I guess is the point there. So, VDI. VDI is an interesting push that came from the, well, for everybody. Everybody was saying, hey, we're going to these thin clients. You know, that's the ebb and tide of the server world where we have big fat back end and thin front ends, mainframe types configurations and mainframes themselves back in the day. Then moving to fully powered PCs that moved to fully super powered laptops that now moved back to everybody to a desktop and then everybody back to a thin client again. And then it'll all probably happen all over again. But that whole process happens over and over and over because we get this nice fluctuation that comes of support and how things go. The nice thing is that Lync 2013 addressed it with a VDI plugin. I want to say it's magic, but it's sort of magic how it's working. It's overlaying things, right? It's capturing at the client side your video and audio, and then giving it an overlay shell of the back end of the client and kind of, you know, mashing them together, and that's how you get it. And you can actually see it, it's sort of within this screenshot that it shows conceptually how it's all pulled apart, and you will be amazed at how well this works. We mentioned before this only works on Windows servers and Windows workstations, thin clients, against a Windows terminal server environment. But there is a local client that's installed on the thin client, and then it's enabled by policies and on the client within the virtual world, and voila, everything works all together. If Lync is on your workstation as well that you're trying to do this with, everything blows up and nothing works. Lync can be installed, just cannot be running at all. It has to be completely exited and terminated, otherwise we have issues. So that works though, and yeah, it works well as long as you meet the requirements of being on a Windows server environment with Windows backend clients. Okay, so that is our configuring clients and our fun and joy there. Now we're going to talk about devices. Devices are something that make or break a PBX and have been extremely limited for a long time in the Windows world. When we first started this journey, the Tangj or the CX700 was the only device you had. Whether you liked it or didn't like it, some people thought it looked like something from outer space that was cool and exciting. Others thought it was a crazy form factor. Others, the price was enormous and outpriced a lot of people to get $500, $600 a device.
And it also had this little thing like it had a keyboard and you needed to enter your username and password. There wasn't this idea of PIN authentication.
Right. But PIN authentication was introduced in 2010 to address a couple of things and break a couple of things in reality, right? the advantage of having the keyboard was you could do Intel M or Kerberos based, well, I guess it would really just be Intel M based authentication because you had a username and password. When you get to a PIN, we don't have that anymore.
Lync understands PIN-based authentication. Exchange doesn't.
And
exactly.
so an Exchange, in their, I'm sure, ultimate almighty wisdom, still hasn't included any authentication mechanisms to allow PIN authentication in 2013.
So you only get that Exchange integration rich feature set when you actually have your phone plugged into the USB port on your device.
Right, so that you can pass your credentials back to Exchange to authenticate to the Exchange world. And really we call it two modes of operating. If you're in PIN authentication mode, you're in the basic mode, and then there's enhanced mode when you have a USB device and you've plugged in and you logged in your password. Now, once you've got the password on the device, you can unplug it, move it to another location, and plug it right back in, and you're good to go until your password expires and you've got to re-enter credentials again. But that's what it is. So as we moved along this this row of devices that we see here. We start with the CX500, 600, 700 is thrown up in there. Now it's interesting to know that the 700 hasn't been developed and is an older client, and is something that, while it exists, I don't know, it works, but it's not getting any new features and new support stuff from it. It is the one that had limited color support. Its display didn't support the pictures. Pictures didn't come to it, but it is a touch display. It again, if you like the fancy look and the I don't know, whatever you want to call the look, a non-traditional phone look. A lot of executives, we used to put this in their environments because it was something that made them happy, because they had something special, a touch screen. Well, that still exists and will work. Just keep in mind that it will not work forever, and it's a deprecated device that eventually will phase out. The CX500, the CX600, or the Astra 6721 and the 25 are devices that were developed all the way up to 2010 and slightly into 2013. We kind of alluded to this.
And there's some HP devices that are out there as well.
There are. HP introduced some, and there was one other that was introduced. But
what about that conference phone?
Well, there's the CX3000. There's the CX5000 that exists. There's the CX6000. There's other devices that exist that are in the video side, but in the pure audio side, the 3000 and your star phone, your traditional star phone, that still exists and is actually a great client.
No, it is a nice full Lync Phone Edition device. Getting these things set up. We haven't talked about common area.
No, we haven't. Common area is the 6721s or the 500s, and their idea is that they don't have the USB, so they can't run in enhanced mode. They can only run in PIN authentication or basic mode. We actually get into that a little later, but that's good. It's also important, I wanted Microsoft's pointed out that with Lync 2013, there has been limited development of the Lync Phone Edition software that's been developed. In fact, it's the same software for 2010 or 13. You don't have to figure out which one to download, which is interesting.
Right, and we've in fact, Microsoft has made the decision to remove the version number from the phone. In that latest update that delivered music on hold to those devices, they also made it be just a Lync Phone Edition device. It's no longer tagged as Lync Phone Edition 2010 or 2013.
Right, and Microsoft has stated that they will no longer be developing this firmware, as we stated previously as well. That means that anything that comes out any further will be bug fixes, will be
security updates,
things that not have to be, but Microsoft's trying to give the longevity and support of these phones. But if you're looking for new features or you're looking for new phones or devices to come out from Microsoft, that's not the current plan of record. So nothing is happening. Instead, the 3-pip, or the phones we'll show in a couple of slides, the third-party IP phones, those devices are where Microsoft is focusing the development cycles and processes, allowing third-party vendors to create devices that have the ability to tie into the update service, have the ability to leverage the existing assets of Lync, but be their own development process. Not uncommon in a lot of things. Look at the roundtable. Initially, it was the Microsoft roundtable. Eventually, it was completely just the Polycom CX 5000, 6000. 6,000. That it just became their device. Microsoft moved it off of their platform and it went directly to them. Now, did they develop and support it originally? Yes. These devices, same thing. Where they could go, nobody knows. But it's going to be something new. So, moving on. So, as we alluded to, 3-pip or third-party IP phones. They are Lync-compatible phones. They're devices that range in a wide range of compatibility. Do they work with a lot of nice features. Some of these devices have their own update administration. In fact, most of them did up to this point because there was no way to tie them into the Microsoft framework. But because they are their own developing house and process, they have the ability to provide a richer feature set that the current Lync phones haven't. Some of the biggest ones we always hear are the 8021X factor, that tying into your phone so that you can have some sort of additional authentication became very cumbersome with the Lync Phone Edition, and to the point where you're almost just allowing anything from this port to just get on the network, and that, for a lot of people, was a problem from a security perspective. So, in-band provisioning, that's a Lync logged-in user, that's not going to change. They're going to have the ability to provision and change things as they were. Their update process and method will be different. Whether they use PIN authentication, a lot of them have the ability to or not, is up to the vendor and the device model. There'll also be, how are we updating it? Is it a web boot? Do we boot off the network always? So you always have the same
Do we also
latest?
get, do these phones and devices introduce some requirement for TFTP?
Yeah, very well could, right? So there are all these new things for the better or for worse. That's what's coming down from the advice what's coming to your world in a phone perspective in Lync. Some examples of what things we see and where you'll notice a wide variety of variation from what we had in the previous Lync phone editions. Stuff like the Snom 370, 370, where they had the sidecar. So interestingly, one way or the other, whether you agree or not, a lot of organizations complained that they didn't have the ability to have this big, massive
physical buttons to
sidecar
talk to those
talk
people.
To pick up lines and see who's on lines. Well, Snom addressed this and has the ability to have multiple sidecars all attached together, and you get the old phone system look and feel. It's back.
But it's all running Lync, and it's giving you that rich presence feel through those same interactions and those same things. I'm a real big fan of those Polycom Kirk things, the wireless Wi-Fi.
But the one thing that my wife complains about, so of course my house is run on Lync, it's run on Exchange, it has been forever, so is the office. That works great, except that then all across the house you have all of these Astras and Polycom phones everywhere, which is, well, it works. But my wife's big complaint is I'm tied to that phone, and so then she ends up using her mobile phone more often than not. My preference would be, move around. Well, that's what the Kirk and even the SpectraLink phones from Polycom can address. It's your typical decked-based phone that you can pick up and walk around.
It's Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi as the transport protocol for a Lync voice call.
Right, so your voice over IP directly as you would expect it to be. Yay, we fix things, right? So the meeting points, the PA1s, another big, and I have to say, I'll plug Snom on the PA1, that it's a very common deployment object in a lot of schools.
That PA1 is a real nice
big
device.
Organizations. Its basics is a device that gets associated to a Lync user. You call that Lync user, it takes it off hook, and goes over the intercom. It's an announcement. So you can paging Bob, line 456, Bob 456. That concept works. And something that is lacking natively, and lacking is the wrong term, because all it is there's nothing more downside Snom, but it's nothing more than a Lync user that's auto answering a call and then playing whatever you say, right?
Yeah.
So,
but it's a great deployment option for those places where you need those intercom type solutions. And if you have a chance, go check out the Lync conference session that Snom did. They actually show some of the advanced things they can do with that PA1 to do additional call capabilities that you really wouldn't envision are out there.
Right.
It's really interesting.
And the other one to point out on the slide is the Polycom VVX, like the 1500. So whether it works natively today or it's future coming video conferencing within a phone, similar to some of the other vendors and their offerings that they have today, they're all possible now because we're relying on the partners to create and develop devices. So when we have these devices, whether they be Lync Phone Edition devices, whether they be 3-pip devices, the question becomes, how do we get them in the environment? And there are pre-deployment stuff that has to happen. The nice thing is once the pre-deployment's done, you just kind of start rolling out devices, and it's a very simple process. As always, we are endpoint agnostic. We don't care what you're logging into as long as that thing you're logging into can authenticate against Lync, right?
How many endpoints can you log into?
Well, by default, it's 8. Well, you could limit that, you could increase that. It's really up to you how you want to manage that. But
think about getting 8 toasts every time somebody tries to call you.
And think about the scaling size of what that means is really, it's not how many users are provisioned in Lync as a complete, back to the first session, it's how many devices and endpoints are provisioned in Lync and
authenticated.
Active at any one given time.
Yep.
But when we think about 8, we can say, wow, that's a lot. Okay, roll that back a little. Let's say we have your Windows phone, it's logged in, your desktop's logged in, your desktop phone is logged in. Let's say you have a CX600. There's 3 already, and you haven't done anything special. Now let's say you decide to launch up your iPad or you decide to launch up your Surface, and now you've got another client. And then, oh yeah, in the conference room you're logging in again because you're moving your conference over to it. So there's now you've just got 6 clients logged in. It very quickly can eat up those 6 clients or those 8. 8's a good number. There are people that I have, or clients that I have that have wanted that limited, and we have, to something like 3. So they'll have a desktop phone, a desktop itself, and then one other device. The next logged in device will log out the last active device. Will just roll off. So keep that in mind. There are limitations, but by default 8 is the number that we're limiting people to. So one thing to consider for these devices is they don't work unless you're enterprise voice enabled. So a PC to PC user on a phone, you can't pick up a phone and use it. The computer can use it as a speaker phone, as a speaker device, as it were, or a mic, but it can't be used as a phone to dial things. Right? So you have to be enterprise voice enabled and have some sort of extension associated, or phone or DAD if you want to receive outbound, inbound calls directly, direct inbound dialing. DNS and DHCP records are required. DHCP is required and important, if nothing else, but for time service, because the phones need to be able, they're not Active Directory members. They need to be told where to get their time from. And they have to be able to log in with a valid time because, like everything else within Lync, we care about time. We have Kerberos requirements, and so we have a 5-minute fluctuation, plus or minus, and if it's more than that, you're not going to log into any Lync device. So we have to have accuracy in time. We also have to know, if we're using PIN authentication, where to go to log in. If I'm not logging in and telling you my SIP domain, how do I know who you are and what server to talk to?
Yeah,
DHCP provides that.
No, completely agreed. And this is something I see in pilots when you're running through some of your dev and POC labs. It's a good thing to remember. Any single physical plug can only attempt authentication against a single environment because of this same DHCP requirement. Since DHCP is handing out what server I am trying to authenticate to when the device boots, it means that I can only try and authenticate to one of those environments. If I've got multiple environments on the same LAN,
I'm going to get what I'm told to go to, right?
Exactly.
There's also an interesting side note is why these devices don't work when you're not on the corporate network. You're receiving DHCP from, let's say, your home network or from a hotel's network. It doesn't include the DHCP information that we're looking for. It may include time, NTP may be pushed, but we're not going to know what to go to unless we've already gone there once before and know how to log in. But so could you at home, I guess if your home router allows you to put in custom DHCP options and push this stuff down, sure, I guess it's possible, but that's not what they're designed for. So these devices are designed to be on corporate networks and work as a phone on a corporate network. Okay, so that's DHCP and DNS. The device update service, native, has been since 2010. A godsend in and of itself to be natively just part of the product rather than trying to set up SharePoint and get things to work that way.
Yes. Don't get me started on how bad that was in 2007.
It worked. We'll leave it at that. Once you got it working, it worked. But the update service is just natively part of this process. Knowing that getting the updates into your Lync environment is not hard. It's not uneasy. There is a script out there that Dave Howe wrote from Premier Support that will actually take all of your scripts or your updates and push them out to all of your front-end servers. And if you want, approve them as well, simplifying your process. You can find that by looking for his name out there. But the script itself isn't required. You can just import the cab file that you download off the internet, and from the cab file, you approve it or not approve it, right? And you have the various manufacturer builds, but beyond that, they're all the same versioning in general. So you're going to have the Aries version for Polycom, for Astra, and then you're going to have ones for the Tang-J or the older versions of the CX700, and the HP. You approve them, import them, don't import them. It's up to you. And once they come in, things just work. So when your devices check in every so often, they'll say, "Hey, there's a new update," and it goes and gets it, and you're
waits
done.
for you to be idle for a little while to try and
it will
not interrupt
never
you during
update
your call.
That would be very bad. If you're on an active call or actively using the device, it will not update and reboot itself. But dial plans, policies, routes, all of that has to be in place, obviously, for things to work. Common area phones, in order for them to be configured as common area phones, and that's PIN authentication, have to have a Lync contact object created for them. Without them, there's nothing for you to log in as. Really, the contact object is the placeholder for the user to log in with his associated PIN and his associated extension.
Yeah, it gives the common area phone that starting point that has a limited dial set that we get because we've created a contact object to proxy for that common area phone device.
Right. Not hard at all. New-CS, common area phone, and then give it a name, give it an extension, and grant policies as applicable. Configuring DNS is, DHCP, as we mentioned, is nothing hard at all. We do want the NTP. Again, we need time for PIN authentication to work correctly. We have the 43 and 120. Those are created by script if we use the scripts within the Lync server. And again, that's what tells us what our domain is and where we bootstrap to. Against
a Windows DHCP
yes, this is very
server.
True. Because we're using Windows DHCP commands in order to make it work. So if not, you're going to have to manually set these. And multiple vendors support the creation of custom object options.
Oh, yeah.
It's not, you just need to figure out how to do it. And there's a lot of white papers out there if you don't know how to do it for your particular device. Start with just doing a look. And if not, again, set the example. So what to do from a bootstrapping process and what servers to query to get to where you're going. That's what 43 and 120 get you to. Okay, so managing phones, managing IP phones. Again, provisioning users, common area phones, and the devices. PIN policies are PIN policies. Now, when we think about PIN policies within Lync, typically we think about there are 3 PIN policies we have to deal with. They are not tied to one another. They are individual policies, and it is what it is. So the 3 policies are the PIN policy. The PIN policy is the one that determines when you do dial-in conferencing and you want to identify yourself, or when you're using a common area phone and you want to authenticate yourself. This is your ATM PIN concept, right? Where you have something to identify you, your extension, but we need to verify who you are by your PIN. That's how we do it, is the PIN policy for your dial-in conferencing. You've also got a PIN policy potentially that locks your physical phone devices. That's completely device specific and user login specific. And so as you log out, that PIN goes away. As you log in, you're requested to put a new one in, and that's the unlock. So if you're not USB tethered or your computer's locked or off and you need to unlock your phone to access some of the more advanced features, that's that PIN. And then finally, we have the exchange PIN for when you're dialing into your voicemail. So
if you've got Lync and Exchange configured together, I will say with a high degree of probability, you will not know your Exchange PIN because you won't ever use it.
Right, yeah, this is typically true. I would agree. The one thing, or the one time I would say you would, or not you would, but an organization would, is when people are so bent on dialing in to subscriber access. But it is so not needed with smartphones and with email, and it all just, the value is limited. But there are 3 separate PINs.
Completely agreed.
Completely managed separately, completely different policies potentially. You could make each user a nightmare if you had a number of digits and expiration on one different than another, and it's up to you. But if you want to play with somebody, that's what you do, is you create 3 different policies that are all different and have them expiring all at different times.
You just like being mean to users,
it's not
right?
mean, it's just enjoying my day. Okay, common area phones, as we talked about. Common area phones are devices that are in, typically, common areas. This would be the front lobby, in a break room, sometimes in conference rooms, although depending on how you're doing your common area phone, your conference room phone gets a common area phone policy and profile, but we allow you to switch it to users. But these common area phones are devices that have very limited access typically. So they can call internal office, maybe local if there's no cost. These are phones that go nowhere on purpose because they're common area. They're not controlled who's going to use them. You don't know.
One use case that we don't really have covered very well in the native Lync product suite, though, is a ring when off hook, such that I can just pick up a phone and it calls a set extension.
That's right. And we have that solution. Not natively. We have that solution by using media gateways or some sort of device that when it goes off hook, do X. And for things like emergency phones, that's what you needed to do, or to call the security desk when you're at the front door, or whatever, that kind of case. Those kind of solutions, you're going to be looking at some sort of media type device or a custom application you could write as well to answer the phone when, yeah, it's up to you. So the new management, the new features for common area phones, they have granted policies for basic usability, very similar to 2010, not a lot of changes for common area phones. The manageability exists in that you can do new, there's not really, there's not much. It's 2010 to 2010 to 2013, common area phones. They are great devices and they have their purpose. Just make sure that you're using them for that specific purpose. And that's to be a phone that's not owned by anybody. It's not going to have voicemail. You can't go anywhere. If you can't ring to the device or the number, it's not going to reroute to something else. Specifically, it's not what they're designed for. They're designed to be typically outbound only phones, sometimes inbound, but very use case specific. There are a couple tools that we want to use when we're looking at troubleshooting calls to make sure things are working, and a lot of them are native and easy to do. So the control panel itself has the ability to drop down and show a route specific, what's going to happen when this voice policy and this dial plan and this number are entered, and you hit go. Does it work? What route does it take? What's its egress point? That's the great control panel for troubleshooting. Shows us our normalization. Do things happen the way we expect? Management shell can do a lot of the same things. Device logs themselves from phones, Premier support may ask for them. They are not readable, the CLEP stuff, natively to you, but there could be information that others want in them. You can capture them and bring them, but they're not
whether
common.
You can read it or the escalation engineers at Microsoft can read it are two very different things.
That's exactly right. We do have a new phone inventory tool. The phone inventory tool is part of the QoE side where we can get more granular and more information about what's logged into your environment and what versions. It's an updated version of what we had before. The update service obviously is the update service, and it still exists today. QoE reports, don't discount them, and we'll get into them later tomorrow about what they can and can't do and the information they give. And don't ever forget to just, sometimes hard resetting your devices, holding the 4-6 and powering your Aries devices on and off, let them reset, or pushing in the pin in the back of one of the old Tanjay devices, fixes a lot of things. Especially if you're using the option to tie you to a VLAN, and that's pushed via DHCP, the only way to clear that is to reset the phone. So if you're moving it between VLANs, you'll never get it to work right unless we reset. Very simple to do, just keep it as a troubleshooting tip. It's not that hard, and it doesn't take that long to just reset them back to something else. Device updates, we touched on very quickly that it is the update that's currently today provided by Microsoft. We download these cab files for the various device types.
UCupdates.exe.
And they're all named the exact same thing, and they all try to expand to the exact same thing with the exact same name, UCupdates.cab. So you have to pick different locations, and it can be a bit cumbersome if you've got multiple device types you're trying to update or bring in device updates. The rules can be set just like they were in 2010. So you can do one-off testing to say this MAC address or this serial number of this device, update it, but don't do anybody else. Everybody else is not approved yet. That way you can do testing to make sure things are the way you want them to work. And you can roll back. So if you push them out and it's a very bad day, hit the rollback button and they all roll back to the previous version, and they all, without re-uploading or changing any of your information. It's automatically there. It's just part of your deployment. So you didn't have to add anything to get this to be here. You installed the Lync server. You have the deployment service. And there's the custom update script that I mentioned previously. It was created by Dave Howe. If you go and search on his name and device update, you'll go ahead and get his little script. Well, I want to say little because I don't want to make it sound like it wasn't any effort involved there. It's a great script. It works extremely well. You have folders with all of your updates within them. You run the script. It goes into the subfolders, figures out what environments exist, update service environments exist in your environment. It updates them all, and then allows you to approve them all at the touch of a button. So instantly done. You don't need to remember the nomenclature of how to get your web service pool updates and things of that nature. So with that, do we have any pending questions in the queue?
We had somebody who asked, and it's not something I was able to quickly find an answer for, IPv6 support on Lync Phone Edition devices or third-party devices?
So third-party potentially. I don't know of any ones that in particular that have the support. The current Lync Phone Editions do not. So I would also state pretty emphatically that they will never will, because we're ending life of development of them. So, but there's no reason that a third-party 3-pip couldn't create one. I'm just not aware of any that have.
Yeah, and I don't think any of the Lync Phone Edition devices running Lync code support it.
Right. Okay. Within that, we are going to take a 10-minute break. That break will, or after the break, we'll be set up to give our next presentation.
Conferencing.
Conferencing presented by Aaron. So we will see everybody back in just a few.